Uganda, in her early years of independence, had one of the most vibrant economies in sub-Saharan Africa. Real GDP grew at an average rate of 4.8%, and GDP per capita grew at 3% per annum. The national savings rate averaged 13.4% of GDP, which was sufficient to finance a moderate level of capital accumulation amounting to 13% of GDP. The growth of manufacturing industries played a key role in maintaining economic growth, and by 1971, industrial output accounted for 14% of GDP. Government needs funds in order to continue functioning properly. Out of the 13.169 trillion budgetary estimates for financial year 2013-2014, the government will raise about 10 trillion, representing 80% of the total amount proposed.
Today, on Turning Round Uganda, the Alternative Policy Series, we figure out the most sustainable ways of increasing the amount of resources available to finance the country's development plans and thereby decrease Uganda's dependence on aid.
This is Turning Round Uganda, the Alternative Policy Series. Coming up on the program.
I think we need to agree who's going to drive this economy. And the government decided in 1989 that it would be the private sector.
So we should not be looking at oil and say it is going to resolve all our financing problems at one go. We've got also to look at the other side to say let's not put too much money into the economy, which will cause what you would call like an overheating.
Plant the seeds of future taxes today.
We need to be able to put our money where our mouth is. That we want to go there, let us put money there.
It is less than 2 years before the deadline for the Millennium Development Goals. It has also become increasingly apparent that Uganda won't achieve the Millennium Development Goals as the biggest percentage of her population is still stuck in abject poverty. The youth are still underemployed, and the public servants are constantly striking over low salaries. Government has inadequate revenue to pay for the public services.
The aspect of paying tax is very, very important for our economy. Because of that, we expect the government to do, it must have the money to be able to do it, and that is the tax. So there we have to be very serious to ensure that all the people pay tax.
It's up to us to either concentrate on increasing the taxes on that productive source, which is a narrow base, or to actually say, how do we quickly broaden the productive base so that now the taxable base is much bigger, and then we begin to lighten the weight.
Uganda has gone through many governance challenges and has made a lot of mistakes in her economic management along the way.
The structure of the economy leaves a lot of the participants in the economy who actually benefit from these public investments. They are not contributing towards those investments. So you have talking about the informal sector where people are not able to be taxed because of the nature of things that they are doing, but also the absence of some of the adequate information. You're talking about things like the national ID. So you cannot easily track what Ugandans do and where they do it from so that they can contribute towards that.
Someone sets up a business, registration can follow 10 years down the road. Someone can start importing, you can only get him when you are checking the goods when they are coming through. You don't follow the accruing benefits, because when you have imported under normal circumstance, we charge you import tax. But that's on the goods, and that import tax, you pass it on to the buyer of the product. But you, who's imported this product, you get the profit.
The capacity of the government to mobilize tax revenue from the citizens is in a way an indication of the confidence people have in the government, an indication of the legitimacy of the government. It's an indication to some extent of the culture as far as the people are concerned. So we have a culture in the country where people are not willing to pay taxes voluntarily. But then again, you cannot force them and coerce them, because that can eventually end up pushing people underground. So there's a lot that has to be done. I believe that there's a lot of money out there to be collected by the Uganda Revenue Authority. They are currently concentrating on the formal sector, and I think they're right to do that, to make sure that by the time they move into the formal sector, that is all taken care of. They're coming up with all sorts of initiatives, you know, looking at taxpayers in different categories, the large taxpayers where we fall. Now they have the medium taxpayers and then the small taxpayers. But until you get the informal sector into the tax net, until you get people to appreciate that actually, you know, you have a duty and right and obligation to pay tax, until you get the citizens to understand that you do not have a moral authority and right to demand services from the government when you're not paying your taxes, we are not going to, you know, break that ceiling of 12% where we've been stuck for quite some time.
What we have realized is that government doesn't put a lot of resources in terms of time, in terms of finances, in terms of human resources, in issues of trade. When you look at the trade ministry, they are given very, very little money. Very little money. It's like it isn't a core ministry. And we're saying when you look at the budget allocation to the Ministry of Trade, they have, for example, been requesting for money to build a lira factory, a lira fruit factory, for almost how many donkey years? They haven't given them any money, you know? And we are talking about moving to a middle income. How are we going to go there?
We asked the experts to highlight reasons why Uganda has not been able to finance her own economy.
One is that our revenues are not that much because we are collecting about 12% or 13% of our GDP in taxes. So that revenue collection by the country itself is low. But also the second thing is there is a need for so many investments that need to be done, and all at the same time. We've had a backlog in all the sectors. Talk about the social sectors like health and education, talk about the physical sectors, energy, roads, agriculture. So we have a huge demand for investment that cannot be matched by our low levels of revenues. So for that we need external support.
Any country will get aid, will get donor aid, but the difference, where the difference comes, is where do you put this money? In capital expenditure, in recurrent expenditure, and so on. So if this money was put into a railway, for instance, was put in road infrastructure, in the waterways, in developing the, for instance, Entebbe airport as a regional hub, look at what has happened in Addis. 15 years ago, that airport there was nothing. Entebbe airport actually was better than Addis 17 years ago when I went there. But what has happened now? What has happened to Kanombe, to the one in Kigali? They are improving and improving very fast. Had it not been Chogam for us, I think we'll still be where we are. The aid that we get in the recent situations actually are quite fresh to us, especially here in Uganda, how we have used this money from the donors, DFID, USAID, the World Bank, European Union. They have pumped a lot of money in Africa. But I think the challenge that we have is governance and accountability. There's not very good governance in this part of the world, I think for various reasons. But for instance, if you look at Singapore, they got a lot of money from the World Bank and put this money into infrastructure, put this money in their training, and so on and so forth. And focused training, not the theoretical training that we have here. It was really skilled training. Today you go to China, you go to South Korea, literally every household is producing something to put to the market.
The Ministry of Planning and Economic Development seems optimistic that Ugandans can finance their own national budget by 80%, an indication that the country might be on the journey to sustainable development.
It would be nice to finance our economy without donor aid, but we haven't got enough companies. We do not collect enough taxes to be able to do everything that we need to do. And I think we are seeing that this year. The teachers are unpaid, the police is unpaid. We are seeing that clearly. So we still need donor funding in some areas, but we are less dependent. You know, we are still surviving now without it and with much less of it. But we need to be able to do without it, and there's no reason why we cannot do without it. We have such numerous opportunities for investment.
I was talking to the managing director of NSSF. He told me every day they collect 2 billion. 2 billion every day. So you account that the working month is 25 days, right? If you remove, or 24 days in a month. Yes. So they collect 50 billion. That's more than 2 billion every day that they collect. Of course, they are collecting it from very many Ugandans who are entering the formal sector, right? So there has been a huge growth of financial services of all other sectors of the economy, and that is why these other macro indicators reflect that way.
The agricultural sector, for example, which employs up to over 70% of the country's population, is key.
The most sustainable sector for Uganda, and that is looking really long term, has got to be agriculture. And the whole value chain. There are opportunities in the whole value chain, including value addition and agro-processing. So that is the sector that will deliver for us. It's beginning to deliver. I am happy with what's happening right now. I see the prices are right for agriculture products, and I see the elite. What has been missing is that educated individual who also has some savings and who actually owns the land, going back to the farm and producing, going into production and also marketing and value addition.
We must transform agriculture, because by transforming agriculture, you are saying that you are putting 80% of your people to work. And this is the source of income. If you're talking about household incomes, you cannot run away from. So agriculture literally is going to be one of the main sources of financing of this economy. It must be included in the economy. As it is today, much of it is not in the economy. It's informal, it's not part of the money economy, it's, you know. So we have a challenge there.
So it is true that some of this financing can come from the commercial banks, but agriculture is usually perceived to be a risky. I'm talking about perceived. Some of these areas have not been proven. So the private capital is not moving as fast as it should into the agricultural sector because of some of those perceptions, but also the nature in which the sector is arranged. It presents a number of challenges for commercial banks. You have your land tenure system, where somebody will have 5 square miles of land and does not want to do agriculture. You are not going to force him to do agriculture. Then there are also issues of returns to the agricultural sector and the risks involved with the drought comes or the floods come or the crops don't come out as much as they would. So the private sector capital is finding other options like in real estate, yet this same capital could be available to flow into the private sector. Now the public sector responsibility is to make sure these incentives to the private sector are turned around, that you open up the countryside so that there are roads and people can market and take in produce and take out produce, take in inputs and take out produce. You want to put power lines so that people can do processing. You also want to set up some larger scale irrigation systems, but also you need to sort out the land tenure system, because I know of so many people who would wish to go and carry out agriculture, but agriculture is done on land. Unfortunately, and until you solve out the land issues, people cannot get into the agriculture. So there are a number of things besides the financing itself that are constraining the flow of private capital into agriculture. People think government should invest into agriculture, but remember, this is private land. These are private farms. Government should only be going in to ease the constraints to the sector, but not be the main driver of investment in that sector.
We also look to government to provide well-researched information on agriculture, to provide those seeds that are properly researched on, which are high yielding, drought resistant, and things of that nature, which then makes it possible for the private sector, once they have had these seeds, to use them and then produce more, and therefore earn more for our economy.
Since 70% of Ugandans are employed in the agricultural sector, the economy could gain immensely from taxing this population.
So even if they were just to get their own money by getting agricultural production and productivity up, you would have more wealthy households, which therefore would take the burden off the government in financing a number of things, especially in the social sector. Because now you would be having households that can pay for their own medication, so you don't need to struggle financing the health sector. It would get injections of this private capital as people are demanding and paying for health services. The same would be for education. These wealthier households will be consuming more commodities, so even if you may not tax the households, through consumption taxes, you would also be able to raise the government revenues. So definitely agriculture is a key sector that we cannot ignore if Uganda is to proceed sustainably, bring about inclusive growth, but also be able to raise the required capital both on the private side to finance all the other development agenda.
Daily Monitor, a paper dedicated to bringing you the truth every day.
As corruption in Uganda sends development partners to cut on their aid commitments, every last drop of government spending is important. And government has to find new sources of revenue if it must ably finance the Ugandan economy. Uganda is an endowed country which can feed from her soils. Uganda's economy and her population rely heavily on the country's natural resources. Uganda can move on to being a middle-income economy by 2040. Here are some of the sectors that Uganda can use to finance our economy. Uganda's extractive industry activities have focused on commercial mining of cobalt, gold, copper, iron ore, tungsten, steel, tin, and other industrial minerals such as cement, diamond, and salt.
And the companies are interested, so a lot of mining companies, both local, domestic and foreign, are here. They've been given concessions and they're actually finalizing their studies. They are ready to go. So the mining sector is also going to be a big sustainable feature for the Ugandan economy.
Extraction of crude oil is projected at 125,000 barrels per day or more for about 15 to 20 years. This could position Uganda to accelerate growth, diversify its economy, and also drastically reduce its petroleum import costs, currently at about $600 million annually.
Oil will give us that boost, that gives us the lift. Right now, if you ask anybody in business what their main constraint is, it is infrastructure, it is energy, it is the roads, it is the railways, it is water, for irrigation, for example. Those are our main challenges. And that oil money that we will get, yes, it is not sustainable. It will be for a short period of time. And what we learn from that is what else can we do from the oil? It's not just about the oil. What else do we take from that and then continue to use sustainably? But if we can harness that money, I know we have at least 60,000 barrels that we already know about, but there's so much exploration ongoing. So it's going to be plenty of money. And if we use it right, it will take us that step forward.
For oil revenues to have a transformational impact, they must be strategically invested in a coherent development plan that leaves Uganda with a more diversified and vibrant economy when oil reserves are eventually depleted.
Oil money presents both opportunities and challenges, as they say. Of course, it resolves the problem of not having the money to invest. But as we have said, it is not just a question of having the money to invest, it is also a question of how much money can the economy take in at any given time. So even if we were to get $10 billion from oil, I wouldn't see us pumping all of it into the economy. So we've got to structure our investment profile not to break the macroeconomics as well. This economy cannot absorb all the money even if you got all the money from oil. That's why the way the oil revenues are structured to be managed is they will go into a fund where you keep it. Now in this fund, you will draw out what you need on a regular basis based on what is your investment plan, but also based on how much the economy can take in. Of course, as we do more investments in infrastructure and the growth and what the economy begins to get ability to absorb more of these monies. So we should not be looking at oil and say it is going to resolve all our financing problems at one go. We've got also to look at the other side to say, let's not put too much money into the economy, which will cause what you would call like an overheating. It's like a constipation. You were too hungry, you've just eaten too much food, now your temperature has gone up, you have another problem. And the temperature in the case of the economy is inflation. And inflation is definitely not a good thing to have.
What about our companies, the private sector? Are they ready? Because oil comes not only with oil, there are other opportunities. There's a whole petrochemical industry that's going to come up. And around it, what other things come around it? Already the UAE have done some studies. They are promoting the other areas that people can look at. I mean, the oil sector needs housing. Are the houses there? Maybe not. I went to Hoima and it's a different Hoima from the one that I had seen 5 years ago. It's developed so fast. So tourism, the hotels, what's happening there? I think we already see the changes. The infrastructure, the roads, you now have tarmac roads in those areas. So yes, the oil sector will drive other sectors around it. And as Uganda, we are lucky we did not discover our oil 30 years ago. That would have been chaos in the way that you want to see. But now civil society is on board. They are looking at government. The parliamentary committees are on board. They are influencing. And I think they are really slowing us down too much. We need the oil. We need the oil out of the ground. You continue talking, and I'm seeing this happening. Let's get some action. Let's move so that our children really will find our country developed. But if we continue just preventing, because what I see now is we are preventing developments in the petrochemical industries.
Agricultural products have dominated Uganda's export throughout its history. Coffee, tobacco, and fish exports have contributed to Uganda's exports, reaching the 5.9 trillion mark in 2012.
Actually, exports have been growing up, except that they are not increasing as fast as they should. And we haven't exhausted the entire potential of our export sector. You're talking about areas like tourism, you're talking about areas like agricultural production. Even the educational sector has some element of exports as regional people come to study here. So what you need to boost the export trade is largely to increase investments, both private and public. And remember, the public is only for stimulating the private capital as an enabler of private capital to come in. So you want more investments in agriculture so that we can sell food to the region. That is quite fundamental. We also still have access to European markets as far as things like fish and flowers are concerned. Flowers not that much because of the challenges in Europe, but at least the market for fish, the market for coffee have not been that much affected. It is an issue of reduced supply within the economy. The prices haven't been that bad. They are still in the same range as they have been. But as you know, our fish stocks have gone down. So we need to see how do we improve the fish stocks. There has been discussion about fish farming, but I do believe we can also do just multiplication and use the available water resources and replenish our fish stocks. So we are trying to improve the regulations in fish so that you don't do overfishing, so that the stocks can come back and we are able to get into this market. So the export side requires an intervention at the production level and processing, but also there are arguments that maybe our exchange rate is too low, because the exchange rate is literally a facilitator or a promoter of exports. If it is too low, it means it is benefiting the importers and discrediting the exporters. So at 2,500, there are tendencies that we think, some people think, it is not favoring exports.
But also what is wrong with us is we are so into consumption and we like expensive things. When you need a phone just to make phone calls and send SMSs, you want a BlackBerry, you want an iPhone. Really? Is that what you need? I mean, Katikitiki does very well. Katochi is perfect for those two. But no, you need the branded products. Ladies, do you really need a Gucci bag? Are you sure you need a Gucci bag? Yes, and the answer is yes from a lot of the ladies. I think that's wrong. There are beautiful bags around that are not that expensive, that are even made locally. Have you seen what we make locally? We have some really nice things. So that is the problem. You want expensive imported products, you know, expensive cars, expensive televisions. That's what we as Ugandans love. We don't save. Every penny you've made, you have used to buy something imported.
The African Growth and Opportunities Act from the USA and Everything But Arms from Europe have created more avenues for Uganda to get foreign exchange through exports.
If you look at how much Uganda has gained from AGOA, it has never been beyond $100 million. I'll tell you that last year, if you looked at the American Chamber of Commerce statistics, they'll tell you that we exported $34 million worth of whatever we wanted to export under this arrangement, AGOA. And this is down from 45 the year before. So it's going down. And it's projected that this coming year, we may not actually even get $20 million. Why? I'm saying it's a huge opportunity for us to seize. But if you come back home and look at the supply side constraints, they are very serious, especially on the side of the farmers, in terms of how they can get the volumes that can move. Because AGOA is a farm market, American market, it's a farm market. If you cannot take advantage of your own market in the region, it will be difficult for you to export to Europe and America and be able to compete and compete well there. Because remember, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, all these, if you are going to export bananas, for instance, you cannot beat Colombia in these markets. They are very proximate, they are very near to these markets. In terms of volumes, they are actually doing a lot. In terms of standards especially, standards are killing this economy.
However, exports also come with their own set of challenges.
Export trade is a little bit complex because if you talk about Everything But Arms, and if you talk about AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act by the American government, these are government regulations, these are government policies between government and government. But let's not forget that trade is a private sector activity. So at the end of the day, and I think one of the good points I read was in the Human Development Report of 2005, which said that the supermarkets in Europe, the supermarkets in America are actually the gatekeepers of the trade. We do not trade government to government, we trade with these private sector entities. So some of them already have ongoing contracts with their other peers across the world. So if you already have the Pakistanis have signed up an agreement with Tesco to supply textiles, it does not matter what the Americans have signed with Uganda. The real traders in textiles have their own ongoing agreements which they cannot break. So over time, you need to enter into these networks at a private sector level. It's good that the government would have given you the overhead cover, but you see you need to actualize them at the private sector level. And when you get to the private sector level, new concerns come up. The private sector are concerned on saying, who are we partnering with? Are you not going to be a weak link within my system? What is your financing mode? I have my own standards to meet with my clients, because when I bring here beef, my clients expect it to be within this magnitude of VAT. So where is the Ugandan dairy and beef industry regarding the standards set by the consumers, which this private trader has to agree on? Regardless of AGOA, when you come at these lower levels, we meet difficult challenges that we could not easily fix. And I do not think we put up a lot of effort to engage private to private sector activity to resolve some of these operational challenges, you would call them.
Daily Monitor, a paper dedicated to bringing you the truth every day.
According to a research conducted by Action Aid Uganda, it is estimated that at least 690 billion shillings, that's about 265 million US dollars, are lost annually due to tax incentives.
I agree with you. There are quite a number of incentives right now in our tax laws which I think have served their time and they need to be looked at. Incentives need to be looked at on a regular basis. You grant an incentive to encourage a certain level of activity. Has it resulted in that activity, and to what extent has the tax foregone been a cost worth paying vis-a-vis the additional activity that has come in?
Financing for Development promotes an integrated approach to development finance, including mobilizing domestic and international resources for development, increasing the trade capacity and investment. The private sector should lead the way while the government puts in place an enabling environment for the sector to flourish.
I think we need to agree who's going to drive this economy. And the government decided in 1989 that it would be the private sector. But a lot of us are still not agreeing with that. We still think, well, maybe the government should invest in this, and maybe government should do that, or civil society do that. I think let us all agree it's going to be the business person. And we broaden the business person, because people's view of who is an investor is the big ones. No, the farmer is an investor. He's putting in his energy, putting in his land, he's trying to sell his produce. He is an investor, small investor. These are the people that will drive the economy, right from the big one to the small one. Let's make it really easy to do business. Let's do a lot of things online. Let's reduce corruption. That's a big issue. Corruption is a two-way thing. The companies, we've got to get rid of that. It causes a lot of losses both to government and to business. And most of the private sector is domestic. I know sometimes you say private sector and everybody's mind is off. All these foreigners are going to, no. Majority of business in Uganda is local. But we need to make it easy for them to do business so that they will succeed. And that's the way forward.
However, it's also true that the private sector will rarely take on huge infrastructure projects that Uganda needs to be able to finance her economy.
That's where the issue of public-private partnerships come in place. And Uganda has moved on this. We have passed the law. We have an institution that's supposed to, that has evolved from the privatization unit. They had all the skills necessary to the public-private partnership unit to develop these projects. we see Bujagali as a shining example of a successful PPP. So His Royal Highness the Aga Khan's group, AKDN, came in with financing. Government came in with financing. Government, of course, had put the project together and would give the offtake. Because if I produce energy and you do not buy it, I'm in big trouble. So the government has ensured that through UEDCL, they will buy every ounce of energy that Bujagali produces. That's a perfect public-private partnership.
The average cost, if you are going to produce 1 megawatt of power, right? You know how much it costs? Close to $4 million. 1 megawatt of power, on average, given the circumstances that we are working in. All right? The Bujagali, you know how much it cost us. 250 megawatts. It was close to $1 billion. Now, you need the people like the Aga Khans to come in and partner with the government, at least for the time being. You need people like the Chinese investors, if they are coming in and they are going to partner with the government. These are big-time investors. But of course, to have this, you need to have good legislation. But as you and I know, even up to today, we do not have a PPP law. The PPP bill is still in Parliament. The other day, I think it was only a handful of parliamentarians that had gathered around to debate the PPP bill. We saw this in the media. But once we have that legislation done through Parliament and the President has assented, it will build confidence in the private sector, not only from here, but even from the diaspora, the foreign direct investment coming in to work with government.
The alternative financial instruments and the new mechanisms to improve financial intermediation should also focus on increasing the availability of bank credit and long-term financing at reasonable cost for large and small plus medium operators and foster development and growth of local small and medium enterprises.
It is high time we revisited the tired script of just concentrating on budget allocation without paying a corresponding attention to budget income generation. Plant the seeds of future taxes today. The Monitor Group over the last 20 years has paid 45 billion in shillings. 45 billion. Now, divide that against 20 years easily, not less than 2 billion. That's just one enterprise. How many of those are we planting in different sectors? How many?
We want to register our companies quickly, easily, no bureaucracies. And at the moment, there's still a lot of bureaucracy. You know, you need to go from one place to the other and another and another. It takes you months to register your company. We need to have infrastructure. We need energy. If we're going to manufacture value add, which is what we have to do, it's not a choice. It's not a choice. We'll never develop if we don't have energy in order to drive the manufacturing sector. We don't have the railway in order to increase our exports. You asked about exports earlier. Why aren't we exporting? You know, we have only one road, single lane, all the way to Mombasa. The trucks go slowly, the road is bad, you know, all that. If we can change that, let's have, you know, highways, 4-5 lanes to Mombasa, 4-5 lanes coming back, and let our goods go. Standard gauge, very fast railway, running up and down. Let our goods go, let our goods come back. Our raw materials, if we need them, come back.
Once the money has come, then comes in the issue of the right areas or sectors to invest in.
We already have like 5 priorities. So you're looking at things like agriculture, you're looking at transport, you're looking at energy, you're looking at ICT, you're looking at health, you're looking at education. Now, these are critical sectors to begin with. But already they themselves can wipe out the entire budget. Without talking about defense, which is also very critical. This area, let's not forget, is still in a volatile geopolitical environment. When you hear the fighting in Goma, Somalia is not yet resolved. Who knows where Central African Republic, I'm told now, is also becoming like another Somalia. So we are still in that. So security also needs to be brought into the equation. Now within all these sectors, we need to walk in and say which roads must we now do. So the selection of roads should no longer be subjective, but rather objective. Subjective, what we are saying, people shouldn't come and say, politically you haven't done my road. Maybe you don't like us as a tribe. These are subjective issues. You want to begin with roads that give you economic mileage. Why am I doing this road? It is either promotion of tourism, you're either promoting agriculture, or you're promoting general movement of goods and services across the country. There must be an economic reason for some of these investments. Now that will help us to say, much as transport is a priority, where are the priorities within this particular sector? Which roads can I keep as good and motorable maram roads for at least the next 10 years, begin to tarmac them later, and which roads must I tarmac today because of their role? That is going into the detail, but picking from the higher strategic level. When you come to the health sector, what type of caliber of staff must I invest in? And which type of hospital levels? So you're looking at hospital level health center 3s and health center 4s. These must be functional, because that is where majority of the Ugandans go for their treatment. If you're looking at education, what type of education investments should I be doing? I would put my limited public resources into primary education, maybe a little bit of secondary, and then vocational. Now, the university loan schemes, the university funding, they are good things to have, but at this point in time when you have limited resources for that sector, you possibly want to concentrate on the labor elements that are going to be part of that growth journey, and vocational training comes in a little bit handy. So you need to keep prioritizing within the priorities and finding how to explain it to others. Definitely there will be people left by the wayside who will have a complaint, genuine complaints, but unfortunately they cannot be met at this point in time. So we need to get into those, and that takes also about institutional building. Because it's one thing to discuss the budget and the policies. As you said earlier on, we have very good policies. But what institutions do we have to implement these policies? If your institutions are weak, then you are using a weak system to take you forward, and that vehicle cannot deliver you to your destination. So we also need to resolve institutional issues.
While the strategies may be wrong here and there, but the aspiration, in my opinion, is good. That everyone must go to school. We need to raise our literacy levels. People need to know how to read and write. You know, where we're coming from 10 years, 20 years ago, not many people, especially up country in the villages, really knew how to read or write. And when you go there, at least today, where you have graduates of P7 and Senior 4 and so on, of course some may not even construct an English sentence, as you may know, but at least they are able to read or write. And that is a very important milestone, if you like.
We have very smart, very intelligent, very actually well-educated young people in our country. But are those the skills we need? Do they have the skills that the private sector needs? And often the answer is no. The answer is no. Yes, they don't have the experience, but experience you can only get on the job. But the skill, so vocational colleges. And I'm happy government has moved that way. The new program that's skilling Ugandans is going to give us those particular people. The good news is those people are easy to get. It's training for 3 months, training for 6 months, not like training a professor where he has to go for 10 years, and it's very easy. So that skilling Ugandan has started. We are going to see a change, and we're going to have the people that we need for the manufacturing sector, to drive the manufacturing sector, the agriculture sector, the tourism sector. We'll have the people. So once we have those, really there's no reason why Uganda cannot achieve our Vision 2040.
After all has been said and done, the biggest stumbling block to financing Uganda's economy and the growth of which remains corruption. The internal auditing mechanism in government offices, if strengthened and professionalized, would greatly bring down corruption.
Uganda seems to have created so many institutions, authorities, commissions, districts, cabinet, parliament. All these are too big for us to carry to the next level. So we need to get into these institutional reforms, because it would appear like every time we used to have a problem, Somebody will come up with a commission, somebody will come up with an authority. And you would note the link, what was the mainstream institution. So you say extension service is not working well, you don't stop it from agriculture, but you set up another agency to do extension. Now you have parallel systems. So we need to rationalize this. We have now gone into the discussion in agriculture, single spine extension service, to get the NADS extension service scheme back into the mainstream of the ministry. That discussion is going on. Now such reforms are required across the board. Who should be running policy, who should be running implementation? And you also want to get back to the energy sector and say, do we need all this multiplicity of institutions? You have electricity regulatory agency for regulation purposes, transmission agency, generation agency, rural electrification, energy for rural transformation. I don't know what else is everywhere within this same sector. And this is one of the sectors where we adequately need efficiency and effectiveness of the budgets, because it is taking off a lot of money. And if you invest into it expensively, then you will end up with a very high tariff, which will again negate the very cause of saying we are investing here to go to 2020 or middle income status, because now the power will become unaffordable and people will find means of again stealing it. So you've just lost out your investment. You begin to lag and fail to pay the private sector people who invested in generation, who invested in transmission. And once the private sector people are not paid, the signal you are sending to other future investors is that this sector is not good for investment because you can't get your return back. So we've got to balance out some of these things. So we need serious institutional and policy reforms in the country.
What we should avoid, one is reckless spending. Uganda will have a lot of money, but there is a lot of reckless spending. I won't go into that, it's so political, but it's so reckless, We need to be able to put our money where our mouth is. That we want to go there, let us put money there. Two, we need to stop marginalizing agriculture. You talk to so many people, they say, oh, those small-scale farmers, those peasants, those are the people feeding this country. And those are the people, it's we, all of us, almost 80% of us are there, So let us stop marginalizing those people. Let us put money there, and you will see this country being transformed.
As we go forward, we've got to balance out our borrowing with our repayments, because it is possible that you borrow the money, you make the investments, you increase your tax revenues, but these old obligations on loans take away whatever little you have received in terms of loan repayments. And in that sense, you can delay longer now having to get more loans because you are so indebted, much as your economy has grown. Meeting the obligations to these creditors of yours wipe out your revenues. So if you are to carry out more investments, you have to do additional borrowing. So we've got to walk this tricky path by balancing out presently what type of loan agreements or credit are we getting. We've got to make sure it is not that expensive credit, which will come in future to haunt us like some countries in Europe. So that is the first thing we need to do to work out our strategic timeline. And that's why I was saying that much as we have a backlog of investments to do, we cannot embark on all of them at the same time, because that may cost us in future if we have to pay back these loans. You may get your oil money and it's no longer your money. It is your creditor's money, because all of them need to be paid off.
Looking at the existing tax laws, I think there are some provisions of the tax law, whether it's incentives, whether rates, whether it's definitions, and that needs to be looked at just to get rid of loopholes here and there, and also getting rid of incentives that are resulting into tax leakage, which leakage is not resulting in any additional benefits to the economy.
Thanks very much indeed to all our experts and to you, the audience, for watching. Keep those comments coming on our Facebook and Twitter handles. The name is Turning Round Uganda, same as the Twitter. That's all we had time for today. Join us next week. Bye for now.